My life was a lie. For 6 long years I cared for my paralyzed wife, believing tragedy had struck our home naturally. But a routine hospital visit changed everything when the doctor gave me a chilling order. Call the police. The truth was more twisted than I could ever have imagined. My own son and his wife were not just ungrateful. They were monsters. And I was the only thing standing between them and a $2 million payout. I am Moses King, 71 years old. For the last 6 years I have been a nurse, a servant, and a ghost in my own home, watching my wife Etta fade away in a wheelchair. But today started like any other Tuesday, with the smell of antiseptic and the sound of my son Tyrell screaming into his cell phone in the hospital hallway. "I need that extension, Tony. I said I would get you the money. Do not come to my house. Do you hear me?" I sat in the plastic chair, holding Etta's limp hand, pretending not to hear Tyrell's desperation. He was 35 years old, a grown man who still thought shouting made him sound important. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, but I knew the pockets were empty. Tyrell had been chasing get-rich-quick schemes since he dropped out of college, and judging by the sweat on his forehead, this latest gamble had gone bad. Beside me stood Paige, my daughter-in-law. She checked her gold watch for the 5th time in 3 minutes, tapping her manicured nails against her arm. She was a real estate agent, specifically for luxury homes, or so she claimed. She was beautiful in a cold, sharp way, like a diamond that could cut glass. She looked down at Etta, not with compassion, but with the annoyance one might feel for a stain on a new rug. "Moses, how much longer is this going to take?" Paige snapped, her blue eyes narrowing. "We have the early birthday party scheduled for 4 o'clock. I cannot be late to receive the guests. The caterers are already setting up at the house." I tightened my grip on Etta's hand. She did not squeeze back. She never did, not since the stroke took her away from me 6 years ago. She just stared blankly ahead, her mouth slightly open, a small line of drool forming at the corner. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, gently wiping her face. Etta was a proud woman once, the kind of woman who would not leave the house without her hat and gloves. Seeing her like this never stopped hurting. "The doctor will be here soon, Paige," I said, my voice low and steady. I spent 40 years as a logistics foreman, running warehouses full of rough men and heavy machinery. I learned a long time ago that speaking softly forces people to lean in to listen. But Paige did not lean in. She rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous. It is just a routine checkup. Why Dr. Evans insisted we come in person instead of doing a telehealth call is beyond me." She pulled out her phone, probably to check her listings, or maybe to ignore the fact that her husband was still arguing with a loan shark 10 feet away. The door opened and Dr. Evans stepped in. He was young, maybe 40, new to the practice, taking over after old Dr. Miller retired. Usually he had a firm handshake and a quick smile, but today he looked pale. His lab coat seemed heavy on his shoulders, and he was sweating despite the air conditioning being cranked up high. "Mr. King, Tyrell, Paige. Good to see you," Dr. Evans said, but he did not look good. He looked terrified. He glanced at Etta in the wheelchair, then at me, then quickly shifted his gaze to the clipboard in his hands. "Well, doctor," Paige cut in, stepping forward, blocking his view of me. "Is she fine? Can we go? We are on a very tight schedule today." Dr. Evans swallowed hard. I need to run a few more reflex tests on Mrs. King. It has been a while since her last full neurological workup. I would like to do this in the private exam room, just me and the patient, to minimize distractions." "No," Paige said instantly. The word came out sharp like a whip crack. She stepped between the doctor and Etta, crossing her arms. "We do not have time for that. And besides, we have medical power of attorney. We stay with her. She gets agitated when she is alone with strangers." That was a lie. Etta did not get agitated. She did not get anything. She was a shell. But I saw the way Paige's jaw set. She was hiding something. Usually I would not argue. I would just want to get Etta home where she was comfortable. But today something in Dr. Evans' eyes stopped me. He looked desperate, pleading. "It will only take 10 minutes, Mrs. King," Dr. Evans said, his voice trembling slightly. "Please, it is protocol." Tyrell walked back into the waiting area, shoving his phone into his pocket. He looked flushed and angry. "What is the holdup? Let us go. Mom needs to rest. Getting ready for the party is going to be exhausting enough." "The doctor wants to take her to the back, alone," Paige said, looking at Tyrell meaningfully. "We don't have time for nonsense." Tyrell grabbed the wheelchair. Tyrell moved to grab the handles of the chair. Dr. Evans stepped forward, his hand raised. "Wait, please. I just need to check her pupils and her muscle tone in her legs. I noticed some irregularities in her blood work from last week. Irregularities? Tyrell froze his hands on the wheelchair. What kind of irregularities? Is she dying? For a second I saw a flash of what looked like hope on my son's face. It made my stomach turn. No, not dying, Dr. Evans said quickly. Just changes. Look, I really need to do this properly. Paige let out a huff of frustration. This is harassment, doctor. If you do not sign her release papers right now, I will have our lawyer on the phone before you can blink. We are taking her home. Tyrell, push. Tyrell started to push the chair, ignoring the doctor. Dr. Evans looked at me, and for a split second our eyes locked. I saw fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. He realized he could not stop them, not without causing a scene that might get the police involved for the wrong reasons, and clearly he was afraid of something specific. Wait, I said, standing up, my knees popping. I was 71, but I was still a big man. I blocked Tyrell's path. Let the doctor finish his checkup, Tyrell. It is for your mother. Dad, move, Tyrell snapped, using his shoulder to nudge me aside. We are leaving. Dr. Evans moved quickly. As Tyrell maneuvered the wheelchair around me, the doctor stepped in close, as if to help untangle the wheel from the chair leg. Mr. King, your collar is twisted. Let me fix that for you. It was an odd thing to say. My clothes were always neat. Etta used to iron them for me every Sunday, and since she got sick, I ironed them myself out of respect for her memory. But before I could step back, Dr. Evans' hand brushed against my chest. He smoothed my lapel, but I felt it. The distinct crinkle of paper being shoved into my breast pocket. His hand lingered for just a second, pressing the paper down. Take care of her, Moses. Dr. Evans whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of Paige complaining about the parking validation. Take very good care of her. Then he stepped back, his hands raised in surrender. Fine, take her. But bring her back next week, I insist. Paige did not even answer. She was already marching toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly on the linoleum. Tyrell pushed Etta past me, not even looking me in the eye. Come on, Dad, stop stalling. We have to go. I stood there for a moment, my hand hovering over my pocket, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Dr. Evans turned and walked back into his office, closing the door firmly. He did not look back. I followed my family to the elevator. The ride down to the parking garage was silent except for Tyrell's heavy breathing and Paige tapping on her phone. I felt the paper burning through my jacket. What was it? A, prescription A, referral. Why all the secrecy? We got to the van, a modified vehicle I had bought with my retirement savings to transport Etta. Tyrell loaded her in, roughly buckling the straps without checking if they were pinching her arm. Watch her arm, son, I said, gently reaching out to adjust the strap. She is fine, Dad. Stop hovering. Tyrell snapped, slamming the door shut. Get in the front. Paige is driving. I climbed into the passenger seat. The drive home was tense. Paige drove aggressively, weaving through traffic while talking on the phone to the caterers. Tyrell stared out the window, biting his fingernails, a habit he had since he was a boy, whenever he was guilty of something. When we finally pulled into the driveway of the big house I had bought 30 years ago, the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary, I felt a wave of nausea. The lawn was covered in signs. Open house, welcome, celebrating 70 years. Paige had turned my wife's birthday into a networking event for her real estate clients. Go get Mom settled, Dad, Tyrell said, getting out. Tyrell and I have to get changed for the guests. They left me alone with Etta in the driveway. I unlocked the wheelchair and lowered the ramp, pushing my wife toward the front door. The afternoon sun was hot, but I felt cold inside. I pushed Etta into the hallway, parked her in front of the window where she liked the light, and kissed her forehead. I will be right back, honey, I whispered. I have to use the bathroom. I walked into the small powder room on the first floor and locked the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely reach into my pocket. I pulled out the small folded piece of paper. It was a page torn from a prescription pad. The handwriting was hurried, scrawled in blue ink. I unfolded it and read the message 3 times because my brain refused to accept the words the first time. Mr. King, do not trust them. Do not give her the medication they provide. Run. Call the police immediately. I found high concentrations of pancuronium in her blood work. That is a paralytic agent used for lethal injections or intubation. She is not paralyzed from the stroke. She is being chemically restrained. She can feel everything, but she cannot move. Get her out now. I leaned back against the sink, gasping for air. The room spun. Pancuronium. Paralytic. She can feel everything. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old man with gray hair and tired eyes. For 6 years I had fed her, bathed her, changed her diapers, and read to her thinking she was gone, thinking her mind was damaged. But she was there. She was trapped inside her own body, screaming for help, and I had not heard her. Tyrell, Paige, my son, and his wife. They were not just bad children. They were monsters. They had been poisoning her, keeping her frozen like a living doll for 6 years. Why money? It had to be money. I heard a knock on the door. Dad. Come on, guests are arriving. Tyrell called out, his voice cheerful, now the mask back in place. I stared at the note. Then I tore it into tiny pieces and flushed it down the toilet. I washed my face with cold water, staring at the man in the mirror. The tired, sad old man was gone, replaced by something else, something harder, something dangerous. I unlocked the door and stepped out. I am coming, son. I called out, my voice steady. I am coming. I walked into the living room where Paige was directing the caterers. She smiled at me, a shark baring its teeth. There you are. Go put on your nice suit, Moses. We want everyone to see what a happy family we are. I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in years. I did not see my daughter-in-law anymore. I saw the enemy, and she had no idea that the war had just begun. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth because what I was about to do next would make them wish they had never been born. Xin lỗi bạn vì sự bất tiện này. Có lẽ tôi đã hiểu nhầm ý, tránh các dấu câu đặc biệt quá mức, nên đã loại bỏ toàn bộ dấu câu khiến văn bản trở nên khó đọc và AI khó ngắt nghĩ đúng nhịp. Để AI voice doctrine cam và đúng ngữ điệu, văn bản bắt buộc phải có dấu chấm, phải chạm hỏi và chạm than để xác định điểm dừng và cảm xúc. Dưới đây là lại phần 2 bữa tiệc của quỹ dụ được viết lại hoàn chỉnh với dấu câu chuẩn văn phong kịch tính sẵn sàng cho việc đọc. I walked out of that bathroom with the doctor's warning burning a hole in my mind. Run. Call the police. Do not go home. But I couldn't run, not without Etta. She was sitting there in her wheelchair, a prisoner in her own body, and now I knew she was a prisoner of a much darker plot. I tried one last desperate attempt to keep her safe within the hospital walls, hoping to buy time for the police to arrive or for Dr. Evans to intervene again. I approached the nurse's station where Paige was already signing paperwork with a flourish of her expensive pen. Excuse me, I said, my voice raspy. I don't think she is ready to travel. She looks pale. Paige, maybe we should keep her here overnight for observation just to be safe. Paige spun around, her eyes flashing with that cold, predatory gleam she reserved for when I stepped out of line. Oh, Moses, stop being so dramatic, she snapped loud enough for the nurses to hear. She is perfectly fine. The doctor is just trying to bill our insurance for unnecessary tests. Besides, you signed the medical power of attorney last year. Remember, you admitted you were too overwhelmed to make these decisions. She pulled the document from her designer bag, waving it in my face like a weapon. I remembered that day. I had been exhausted, having spent 3 nights awake watching Etta breathe, and Tyrell had handed me a stack of papers saying it was for insurance. I had signed them because I trusted my son. I had signed away my wife's life. If you try to keep her here, Moses, I will sue this hospital for holding a patient against her will, and I will have you declared incompetent for interfering with her care. Paige hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Do you want that? Do you want to spend your remaining years in a state facility? I froze. The threat was real, and she had the paperwork to back it up. I looked at Tyrell, hoping to see my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike. But he was busy typing on his phone, ignoring his father and his dying mother. I had no choice. I had to go into the belly of the beast to save her. The ride to the house was a blur of nausea and terror. Tyrell drove the van like he was hauling lumber, not his mother. Every bump in the road made Etta's head loll to the side, and every time it happened, I gently straightened her, fighting the urge to strangle my son from the back seat. When we finally pulled into the driveway of the big house I had bought 30 years ago, the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary, I felt a wave of nausea. The lawn was covered in signs. Open house. Welcome. Celebrating 70 years. Paige had turned my wife's birthday into a networking event for her real estate clients. Go get Mom settled, Dad, Tyrell said, getting out. Tyrell and I have to get changed for the guests. They left me alone with Etta in the driveway. I unlocked the wheelchair and lowered the ramp, pushing my wife toward the front door. The afternoon sun was hot, but I felt cold inside. I pushed Etta into the hallway, parked her in front of the window where she liked the light, and kissed her forehead. "I will be right back, honey," I whispered. "I have to use the bathroom." I walked into the small powder room on the first floor and locked the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely reach into my pocket. I pulled out the small folded piece of paper. It was a page torn from a prescription pad. The handwriting was hurried, scrawled in blue ink. I unfolded it and read the message 3 times because my brain refused to accept the words the first time. "Mr. King, do not trust them. Do not give her the medication they provide. Run. Call the police immediately. I found high concentrations of pancuronium in her blood work. That is a paralytic agent used for lethal injections or intubation. She is not paralyzed from the stroke. She is being chemically restrained. She can feel everything, but she cannot move. Get her out now." I leaned back against the sink, gasping for air. The room spun. Pancuronium, paralytic. She can feel everything. I looked at myself in the mirror, an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. For 6 years I had fed her, bathed her, changed her diapers, and read to her, thinking she was gone, thinking her mind was damaged. But she was there. She was trapped inside her own body, screaming for help, and I hadn't heard her. Tyrell, Paige, my son and his wife, they weren't just bad children. They were monsters. They had been poisoning her, keeping her frozen like a living doll for 6 years. Why money? It had to be money. I heard a knock on the door. "Dad." "Come on, guests are arriving," Tyrell called out, his voice cheerful now, the mask back in place. I stared at the note. Then I tore it into tiny pieces and flushed it down the toilet. I washed my face with cold water, staring at the man in the mirror. The tired, sad old man was gone, replaced by something else, something harder, something dangerous. I unlocked the door and stepped out. "I'm coming, son," I called out, my voice steady. "I am coming." I walked into the living room where Paige was directing the caterers. She smiled at me, a shark baring its teeth. "There you are. Go put on your nice suit, Moses. We want everyone to see what a happy family we are." I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in years. I didn't see my daughter-in-law anymore. I saw the enemy. And she had no idea that the war had just begun. I went to my room and changed, but I didn't stay there. I cracked my door open and watched the guests arrive. They weren't our friends or neighbors from the church. They were sharks in Italian suits and women with plastic smiles holding glasses of champagne. They walked through my living room, touching my furniture, judging the crown molding, and talking about square footage. I slipped out into the hallway, moving with the quiet tread of a man who had spent years walking softly so as not to wake a sick wife. I mingled with the crowd, pretending to be a senile old uncle, sipping a glass of water and listening. "Nice layout," one man said, tapping the wall. "Knocking it down would open up the space, though." "Yeah, but the location is prime," another replied. "You could flip this for double if you got the kitchen." My blood boiled. This was my home. Every scratch on the floorboards had a story. Every dent in the wall was a memory of Tyrell playing ball inside when it rained. And now these vultures were planning to gut it. I saw Paige near the fireplace holding court with a tall man in a gray suit who looked like he owned half the city. I drifted closer, leaning against a pillar, pretending to admire a painting. "So, Paige," the man asked, swirling his drink, "what is the timeline on possession? The market is hot right now, but I can't wait 6 months. Paige laughed, a sound that was like glass breaking. "Do not worry about that, Michael. The situation is very fluid. My in-laws are in a very fragile state. Frankly, we expect the property to be vacant by next month at the latest. The old man is losing his mind, and the mother, well, she is on her last legs." I gripped my water glass so hard I thought it would shatter. Vacant by next month. She wasn't just predicting our deaths. She was scheduling them. She was selling our home out from under us, promising delivery of a house that was still occupied by the living. "We are moving them to a facility as soon as the paperwork clears," Paige continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Honestly, it is a mercy. They have no quality of life left." I had heard enough. I needed to get to Etta. I needed to make sure she was safe right now. I pushed through the crowd of strangers who looked through me like I was a ghost and headed for the master bedroom. The door was closed but not latched. I pushed it open slowly, expecting to see Etta alone or maybe a nurse, but what I saw stopped my heart. Tyrell was standing over Etta's bed, his back to me. He was holding an IV bag, the nutrient solution that kept my wife alive. But in his other hand, he held a syringe filled with a thick yellow liquid. He was injecting it directly into the port on the IV line. My instinct was to roar to rush him and tackle him to the ground, but the doctor's note flashed in my mind. Call the police. Run. Do not trust them. If I attacked him now with a house full of witnesses, Paige would twist it. She would say I had snapped, that I was attacking my son. She would have me committed tonight, and Etta would be dead by morning. I forced my feet to shuffle. I forced my breathing to sound ragged and loud. Tyrell spun around, hiding the syringe behind his back, his eyes wide with panic. "Dad," he stammered, "what are you doing in here?" I blinked my eyes, trying to look confused and harmless. "Looking for Etta," I mumbled, letting my voice tremble. "I thought I heard her calling me." Tyrell let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. He stepped away from the IV bag, slipping the syringe into his pocket. "Mom cannot call anyone Dad. She cannot speak. Remember, you are hearing things again. Look, you need to go back to the party. Paige is looking for you." I looked at the IV bag. The yellow liquid was swirling, mixing with the clear saline dripping down toward my wife's arm. Poison. Pancuronium, the doctor had said. A paralytic agent that stopped you from moving while you felt everything. "What are you giving her son?" I asked, pointing a shaking finger at the bag. "It looks different." Tyrell's laugh was nervous, high-pitched. "Just vitamins, Dad. Doctor said she needs a boost for her brain to help her wake up. It is new stuff, very expensive. Vitamins, a lie, a clumsy, stupid lie from a man who had never cared about anyone but himself." I looked at Etta. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, one pupil slightly larger than the other. She was in there, trapped, terrified, and her own son was poisoning her right in front of me. "That is good, son," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "You are a good boy, taking care of your mother." Tyrell smirked, the arrogance returning. "Yeah, sure, Dad. Go on now, let Mom rest." I turned and walked out of the room, my legs feeling heavy as lead. I heard Tyrell lock the door behind me. I walked back into the noise of the party, the laughter of the investors, the clinking of glasses sounding like a funeral dirge. I went to the kitchen and poured my water down the sink, replacing it with tap water to cool my burning face. I knew what I had to do. I could not save her tonight, not with the house full of people and Tyrell guarding the door. But I knew something Tyrell did not know. I knew what logistics were. I knew how to manage inventory, how to swap shipments, how to make things disappear and reappear where they were supposed to be. My son thought I was a senile old man who ironed his shirts and watched TV. He forgot that I spent 40 years managing the flow of millions of dollars of goods. He forgot that I knew how to spot a thief and how to set a trap. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 7 p.m. The party would end soon. And tonight, while they slept, the old man they dismissed was going to go to work. I was not just Moses King, the retired foreman, anymore. I was a husband protecting his wife. And God help anyone who got in my way. Because that yellow liquid in the IV bag, it wasn't just poison, it was a declaration of war. The house was silent, but it was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. Earlier that evening, Paige had walked into the living room with a steaming mug of herbal tea. "Here, Moses," she had said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Drink this. It will help you sleep. You look so tired." I had taken the mug with a trembling hand, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "Thank you, Paige. You are too kind." I walked to my bedroom, the room I used to share with Etta before they moved her downstairs to the guest room for convenience. As soon as the door clicked shut, I poured the tea into the potted fern by the window. I was not tired. I was wired with adrenaline and terror. I knew that tea was laced with something just like Etta's IV bag. They needed me asleep. They needed me out of the way so they could continue their slow execution of my wife. I waited. I sat on the edge of the bed watching the red numbers on the alarm clock change. 11, 12, 1, 2. At 2:15 in the morning, I stood up. My knees popped and my back ached, but I pushed the pain aside. I was not 71 years old tonight. I was a man on a mission. I opened my door an inch. The hallway was dark. The only light came from the street lamps filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long, skeletal shadows on the floor. I stepped out into the hall, moving with the silent tread I had perfected over 40 years of walking warehouse floors. I needed to get into my old office. It was the room at the end of the hall, the one Tyrell had claimed for himself 5 years ago. He called it his strategy room, where he supposedly ran his business empire. I knew it was where he played video games and ignored his responsibilities. I reached the door and turned the knob. Locked. Of course it was locked. Tyrell was lazy, but he was paranoid. He kept his failures hidden behind locked doors. But he forgot one thing. I built this house. I laid the floorboards. I hung the doors. And I knew that the locking mechanism on this particular door was old. I reached up to the top of the door frame, my fingers brushed against dust and then metal, the emergency key. I had put it there 20 years ago when Tyrell was a teenager and used to lock himself in to skip homework. He had never found it. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I froze, holding my breath, waiting for a door to open or a voice to call out. Silence. I pushed the door open and slipped inside, closing it softly behind me. The smell hit me first. Stale smoke, cheap energy drinks, and the underlying musk of desperation. I pulled a small flashlight from my pocket, shielding the beam with my fingers. The beam swept across the room. My beautiful mahogany desk, the one I had bought when I got my promotion to foreman, was covered in trash. Bedding slips, fast food wrappers, empty beer bottles. It was a desecration. I moved around the desk. I moved around. I was not here to clean up his mess. I was here to find the truth. I tried the drawers. The top ones were open, filled with useless junk. But the bottom drawer, the deep file drawer, was locked. I did not have a key for this one. I looked around for something to pry it open. I saw a letter opener on the desk, a heavy brass one that Etta had given me for our 25th anniversary. I grabbed it. I jammed the tip into the gap between the drawer and the frame. I leveraged my weight against it. Wood splintered. The lock groaned. With a sharp crack, the drawer popped open. I pulled it out. It was stuffed with papers. I started sifting through them, my heart hammering against my ribs. The first layer was financial ruin. Bank notices. Final warnings. Foreclosure threats. I picked up a letter from the bank dated 2 weeks ago. It was a notice of default on a second mortgage. A second mortgage on my house. Tyrell had forged my signature. He had leveraged the home I owned free and clear to pay for his gambling debts. The amount was staggering. $300,000. My hands shook as I put it aside. I dug deeper. There were letters from loan sharks, nasty things with veiled threats about broken kneecaps and accidents. Tyrell was drowning. He was not just broke, he was a dead man walking unless he came up with a lot of money very soon. And then I saw it. A blue folder at the very bottom of the stack. It looked pristine compared to the crumpled notices. I pulled it out and opened it. It was a life insurance policy. I shined the light on the document. Policyholder Etta King. Beneficiary Tyrell King. Coverage. Amount $2 million. I felt the bile rise in my throat. They had taken out a policy on my wife, but how? Etta had been paralyzed for 6 years. No insurance company would underwrite a new policy for a stroke victim in her condition unless they lied. I scanned the fine print, and there it was. The clause that explained everything. The clause that explained the yellow liquid in the IV bag. The clause that explained why they dragged her out of the hospital today. Benefit payable only upon death occurring within the primary residence due to natural causes or complications arising from pre-existing conditions. Exclusions apply for death occurring in a medical facility or under suspicious circumstances requiring autopsy. I dropped the folder on the desk. It all made sense. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a sickening clarity. If Etta died in the hospital, the doctors would run tests. They would find the poison. They would find the pancuronium. The insurance would investigate. They would get nothing. But if she died here in her bed in her sleep, it would look like nature taking its course. A sad end to a long illness. The local coroner would sign the death certificate without looking twice. Tyrell and Paige would collect $2 million. Enough to pay off the sharks, enough to save the house, enough to keep living their lie. They were not just killing her, they were harvesting her. I stood there in the dark, staring at the paper that put a price tag on my wife's life. $2 million. That was what she was worth to them. Not the woman who baked cookies for the church sale, not the mother who sat up with Tyrell when he had the chicken pox, just a check waiting to be cashed. I reached for the papers intending to take them. I needed this. This was the proof. This was the nail in their coffin. Click. The room was suddenly flooded with blinding light. I spun around, shielding my eyes. My heart stopped. Paige was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of red wine loosely in her hand. She did not look surprised. She did not look angry. She looked amused. She took a slow sip of wine, her eyes tracking from my face to the broken drawer and then to the papers scattered on the desk. "Dad," she said, her voice smooth and calm like oil on water. "What are you doing up so late?" I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the insurance policy. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I was looking for... I stammered, my mind racing. I could not let her know that I understood. If she knew that I had read the policy, that I knew about the poison, she would not let me leave this room. Paige took a step into the room. She glanced at the papers, but she did not acknowledge them. Instead, she looked at me with a pitying expression. "Oh, Moses, you are confused again, aren't you?" She sighed, shaking her head. "This is not the bathroom, Dad. The bathroom is down the hall. Remember, she was doing it. She was doing exactly what they had planned, gaslighting. She was rewriting reality right in front of me. She was not going to confront me about breaking into the desk. She was going to use this as proof that I was losing my mind. "Look at this mess," she said, gesturing to the papers I had exposed. "You pulled everything out. Were you looking for your old work files? You have been retired for 10 years, Moses. You do not work here anymore." She walked over to me. She smelled of expensive wine and lavender lotion. She reached out and gently took the insurance policy from my hand. She did not even look at it. She just placed it back in the drawer as if it were a child's drawing. "You are having one of your episodes," she said softly, almost tenderly. "Tyrell was right. We need to get you some help. You are wandering around breaking things. It is not safe for you here." I looked into her eyes. They were cold, dead. There was no soul behind them, just calculation. She was daring me to argue. She was daring me to say I knew the truth. Because if I did, she would scream. She would wake Tyrell, and I would never make it out of this house. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I forced my hands to tremble more than they already were. I thought this was my office," I whispered, letting my voice crack. I needed a stamp." Paige smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Of course you did. Come on. Let us get you back to bed. You need your rest. Tomorrow is a big day." She took my arm. Her grip was firm, iron hard. She led me out of the room, away from the evidence, away from the truth. "Tomorrow," she said as she walked me down the hall, "we are going to have a long talk about your living arrangements. I think it is time we made some changes. Do you not agree?" I nodded, shuffling my feet. "Yes, changes." She led me to my room and watched me get into bed. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, silhouetted against the hall light. "Good night, Moses," she said. "Sleep tight." She closed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. I lay in the dark, listening to her footsteps fade away. She thought she had won. She thought I was a confused old man who had wandered into the wrong room. She thought she had neutralized the threat, but she was wrong. I was not confused. I was awake. And now I knew exactly what I was up against. They had locked me in. They had the poison. They had the insurance policy. But they made one mistake. They let me live through the night. And come morning, the old man they thought was senile was going to burn their whole world to the ground. The sun rose over the suburbs of Atlanta, casting long, deceptive shadows across the lawn of my home. To the neighbors, it was just another quiet morning at the King residence. But inside, I was preparing for a tactical operation. I had not slept. The adrenaline coursing through my veins felt like a drug sharpening my senses, burning away the fatigue of 71 years. I had a plan. It was risky, insane even, but it was the only way to keep Etta alive until I could get the police involved without them talking their way out of it. I knew Tyrell's routine. He would sleep until 10 hungover from the expensive scotch he had been drinking to celebrate his premature inheritance. That gave me 2 hours. I went to the garage where we kept the medical supplies. It was a converted storage space filled with boxes of gauze saline and the special vitamins. Tyrell insisted on administering himself. I moved with the precision of the logistics foreman I used to be. For 40 years, my job was to ensure that inventory was exactly where it needed to be, that seals were unbroken, and that discrepancies were resolved before the auditors arrived. I knew how to make things look untouched. I found the box on the top shelf hidden behind a stack of adult diapers. It was labeled supplements. Inside were rows of small glass vials filled with a pale yellow liquid, the pancuronium, the poison that had stolen my wife's voice and movement for 6 years. My hands, which usually trembled with the feigned frailty of age, were rock steady. I took a clean syringe from the supply kit. I grabbed a bottle of saline solution and a small bottle of vitamin B12 from my own stash, which had a natural yellow tint. I sat at the workbench, the smell of oil and sawdust grounding me. One by one, I carefully punctured the rubber seals of the poison vials. I drew out the deadly liquid, emptying it into a jar I had set aside to give to the police later as evidence. Then I mixed the saline with a tiny drop of B12 to match the color. I injected the harmless mixture back into the vials. It was tedious work. Sweat dripped down my forehead, stinging my eyes. I had to ensure the fluid levels were identical. I had to ensure the rubber stoppers did not look chewed up. I wiped every vial down to remove my fingerprints just in case. I was not just a husband anymore. I was a counterinsurgent in my own home. I finished just as I heard heavy footsteps on the floor above. Tyrell was awake. I quickly hid the jar of poison behind a loose panel in the wall, returned the vials to the box and placed it back on the shelf exactly as I had found it. I grabbed a broom and started sweeping the floor, transforming instantly back into the confused, helpful old man. The door to the garage swung open. Tyrell stood there blinking in the bright morning light, wearing a silk robe that he had bought with my money. He looked at me with disdain. "What are you doing out here, Dad?" he grumbled, scratching his chest. "It is freezing." Just cleaning, son," I stammered, leaning on the broom. I wanted to be useful. Tyrell rolled his eyes. "Whatever, go inside. Mom needs her morning drip. I have to prep her meds." I walked past him, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the test. If he noticed the difference, if he saw that the liquid was slightly less viscous or the color was a fraction of a shade off, he would know. And if he knew I had tampered with it, he would kill me right there. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands shaking for real now. I watched from the doorway as Tyrell went into the garage. I heard the clinking of glass. He was gathering the vials. He came back into the kitchen a few minutes later, carrying the tray with the IV bag and the syringe. He set it down on the counter. I held my breath. He picked up the syringe and the vial. He drew the liquid up. He paused. He held the syringe up to the kitchen light, squinting at it. The liquid glowed a soft gold. "That is weird," he muttered. My blood turned to ice. "What is it, son?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Tyrell tapped the side of the syringe. "This batch looks thinner, or something. Maybe it is just the light." He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Did you touch these boxes, Dad?" I gripped my coffee mug, using it to anchor my trembling hands. I moved some boxes to sweep behind them. Did I break something?" I let a note of panic enter my voice, the fear of a scolded child. Tyrell stared at me for a long, agonizing second. He was looking for a sign of intelligence, a sign of the father who used to catch him lying about his homework. But I gave him nothing but vacuous confusion. He scoffed, shaking his head. "No, you didn't break anything. Just stay out of my stuff, old man. You are going to mess up the dosage." He turned back to the tray and injected the saline mixture into the IV bag. He did not know. He was arrogant, and his arrogance made him sloppy. He assumed I was too stupid to understand what he was doing, so he never considered that I could outsmart him. "I will go hook her up," Tyrell said, grabbing the IV stand. "You go sit in the living room. Watch your shows. Stay out of the way." I watched him walk into Eda's room. I watched him hook up the bag that I had neutralized. I watched the clear liquid start to drip down the line, entering my wife's veins. But this time it was not poison. It was water. It was life. I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the television without seeing it. I was waiting. Dr. Evans had said the effects of pancuronium wear off if not replenished. If I stopped the poison, her body would start to flush it out. But how long would it take? And what would happen when it did? By 2 p.m, the house was quiet. Tyrell had gone out to meet investors, which I knew meant gambling. Paige was in her office shouting at someone on the phone about a closing date. I crept into Eda's room. I closed the door softly and pulled a chair up to her bedside. "Eda," I whispered, taking her hand. "Can you hear me? It is Moses. I know, Eda. I know everything. I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner." I watched her face. For the last 6 years, her face had been a mask, slack, expressionless. But as I sat there, I saw something. A twitch. It was so small I thought I imagined it. A tiny spasm at the corner of her mouth. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. "Eda." Her eyelids fluttered. Not the slow, heavy blink of the drugged, but a rapid, struggling flutter. Like someone trying to wake up from a nightmare. Then her index finger, the one resting in my palm, moved. It curled inward, scratching against my skin. It was weak, barely a tremor, but it was voluntary. "Oh, God," I sobbed quietly, pressing my forehead against her hand. "You are back. You are coming back." Her eyes opened wide. For the first time in years, they were not glassy. They were focused. They locked onto mine with a terrifying intensity. They were filled with tears. They pooled in the corners of her eyes and rolled down her temples into her hair. She was crying. She was feeling. The chemical chains were breaking. Her lips parted. She tried to speak. No sound came out, just a dry rasp of air. Her throat muscles were still weak, atrophied from years of silence. But I saw the shape of the word she was trying to form. Help. I squeezed her hand, tears streaming down my own face. "I am here, baby. I am going to get you out. I promise." But then the terror hit me. She was moving. She was crying. If Paige walked in right now, if Tyrell came home early, if they saw her move, if they saw the light in her eyes, they would know the poison had stopped. They would know someone had tampered with the IV. And they would not use poison next time. They would use a pillow or an accidental fall. Etta's recovery was a miracle, but it was also a death sentence if we were not careful. I had to hide her progress. I had to tell her to play dead, just like I was playing senile. "Etta, listen to me," I whispered urgently, wiping her tears away with my thumb. "You have to stay still. You cannot move when they are here. Do you understand? If they see you move, they will hurt you. You have to pretend, just for a little longer." Her eyes searched mine, filled with fear and confusion, but then slowly she blinked once. She understood. I heard the front door open. Ideally, heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. Tyrell was home. "Dad, where are you?" he shouted. I looked at Etta one last time. She let her eyes go blank. She slackened her jaw. She returned to the prison of her paralysis, but this time she had the key. I stood up and shuffled toward the door, my heart pounding like a war drum. The tide had turned. My wife was back. And together we were going to bring the whole house down on top of them. I knew that my physical presence was not enough. I could not stand guard over Etta every second of every day. I had to sleep eventually. I had to use the bathroom. And every moment I stepped away was an opportunity for them to undo my work, or worse, to end it permanently. I needed eyes that never blinked. I needed a witness that could not be gaslighted or intimidated. It was trash day, a mundane suburban ritual that I turned into a covert operation. I gathered the bags from the kitchen, moving with the slow, shuffling gait that Tyrell and Paige expected from me. "I am taking the trash out, son." I called out to Tyrell, who was sitting on the couch watching sports with a beer in his hand at 10 in the morning. He did not even look away from the screen. "Just, do not wander off, old man, and do not talk to the neighbors. You embarrassed us enough last time." I gritted my teeth and stepped out into the humid Atlanta morning. The heat was already rising off the pavement. I walked down the driveway, dragging the bin to the curb. I looked left, then right. The street was empty. I walked over to the side fence that separated my property from Mr. Henderson's. Henderson was a retired police sergeant, a man made of leather and grit who had seen the worst of humanity during his 30 years on the force. We had not spoken much lately because Paige had isolated me, telling the neighbors I was becoming aggressive, but Henderson was old school. He trusted his gut, not gossip. I tapped on the wooden slat 3 times, a signal we had used years ago when we traded gardening tips. A moment later, Henderson appeared. He was pruning his roses, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at me and then at the house, ensuring no one was watching. "Moses, you look like hell," he said quietly. "I feel like it, Arthur. I need a favor. A big one," I whispered, leaning close to the wood. "I need eyes inside. They are hurting her." Henderson did not ask questions. He did not ask for proof. He simply nodded. He reached into his gardening bucket and pulled out a small box. "I had a feeling things were going south over there," he said, handing the box over the fence. "It is a nanny cam, hidden inside a digital alarm clock, motion activated, night vision. It connects to an app on your phone. I set it up on my secure network so they cannot trace it on your Wi-Fi." I took the box, my hands trembling. "Thank you, Arthur. I do not know how to repay you." Henderson's face hardened. "You do not owe me anything." But you should know something, Moses. Last week I was up early drinking my coffee on the porch. I saw that daughter-in-law of yours come out to the bins. She had your prescription bottles, the heart medication, the blood pressure pills. My stomach dropped. I had been looking for those. I thought I had misplaced them. I thought my memory was finally going. She emptied them into the trash bag. Henderson continued, his voice low and angry. She threw them out, Moses. And then she put the empty bottles back in her pocket. They are trying to make you sick, or make you think you are crazy. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. It was not just my mind playing tricks. It was a systematic dismantling of my reality. They were gaslighting me while they murdered my wife. I have to go, I said, tucking the box under my shirt. Thank you, Arthur. Watch your back, Moses, Henderson said, gripping his pruning shears. If you need backup, you flash your porch light 3 times. I still have my service piece. I walked back to the house, the weight of the clock against my ribs feeling heavier than lead. I had a weapon now, but I had to deploy it without being caught. I entered the kitchen. Tyrell was still on the couch. Paige was in her office, probably looking for new ways to spend money she did not have. I went straight to the master bedroom. Etta was lying there, staring at the ceiling. I closed the door softly. I moved quickly. On the nightstand, there was an old digital clock with red numbers. I unplugged it and shoved it deep into the back of the closet under a pile of blankets. I unpacked the device Henderson had given me. It looked identical to a standard modern alarm clock. Black plastic, blue numbers, innocuous. I plugged it in. I set it on the nightstand, angling it perfectly so the lens hidden in the display face pointed directly at the bed. I pulled out my phone, the burner phone I kept hidden, and downloaded the app Henderson had written on a sticky note inside the box. The feed popped up instantly. Crystal clear. High definition. I could see every line on Etta's face. I could see the rise and fall of her chest. I leaned down and kissed Etta on the forehead. I am watching you, I whispered. I am always watching. Do not be afraid. I left the room and went to my own bedroom, closing the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the small screen of my phone. It was my lifeline, my window into hell. Hours passed. I watched the empty room. I watched the sunlight move across the floor. And then around 2 in the afternoon, the door on the screen opened. Paige walked in. She was wearing a white silk blouse and black slacks, looking every inch the successful professional she pretended to be. But her face was twisted in a snarl. She was carrying a bowl of soup. I turned the volume up on my phone, pressing it to my ear. Time to eat, Etta, Paige said, her voice flat and cold. And do not make a mess today. I just had these sheets cleaned. She set the bowl down on the nightstand right next to the camera. I held my breath. If she looked closely, if she noticed the new clock. But she did not look at the clock. She looked at my wife with pure, unadulterated hatred. She grabbed a spoon and scooped up the soup. It looked hot. Steam was rising from it. She did not blow on it. She shoved the spoon toward Etta's mouth. Open up, Paige ordered. Etta's lips remained closed. I knew why. Her throat muscles were still recovering. Swallowing was difficult. She was afraid of choking. She needed patience. She needed gentleness. Paige did not have patience. She jammed the metal spoon against Etta's teeth. Open your mouth, you useless old hag, Paige hissed. My hand gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. Etta tried. I saw her jaw tremble. She opened her mouth slightly. Paige shoved the hot soup in, spilling half of it down Etta's chin and onto the pristine white sheets. Look at that, Paige shouted, slamming the spoon back into the bowl. Look at what you did! You are disgusting! You are just a giant baby, a waste of space! She grabbed a napkin and scrubbed Etta's face roughly, her nails digging into my wife's soft skin. Etta's eyes widened in pain. Tears began to pool in them. Why don't you just die? Paige whispered, leaning in close, her face inches from Etta's. Why are you so stubborn? Nobody wants you here. Moses is tired of you. Tyrell hates looking at you. We are all just waiting for you to stop breathing so we can be free. And then she did it. And she did. Because Etta made a small gurgling sound of distress, Paige pulled her hand back and slapped my wife across the face. The sound was tinny through the phone speaker, but it echoed in my soul like a thunderclap. It was a hard, vicious slap. Etta's head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed instantly on her pale cheek. Stop crying, Paige screamed, raising her hand again. "Stop it, or I will give you something that will make you sleep for a week." I bit my lip. I bit it so hard that I tasted the hot metallic tang of blood. My entire body convulsed with the urge to run down the hall, to burst into that room and tear that woman apart with my bare hands. I was a strong man. I could snap her neck before she even screamed. But I froze. I forced my muscles to lock. I forced my feet to stay planted on the floor. If I went in there now, I would go to prison for assault or murder. Paige would claim self-defense. Tyrell would back her up. The police would see an angry black man attacking a white woman in her own home. I would lose, and Etta would be left alone with them forever. I needed the recording. I needed the proof. I needed the world to see what I was seeing. I watched as Paige threw the napkin on the floor and stormed out of the room, leaving my wife crying silently in the dark, her cheek burning, her heart breaking. I looked at the screen, at the red record icon blinking in the corner. I had it. I had the assault. I had the verbal abuse. I had the confession that they wanted her dead. I swallowed the blood in my mouth. I wiped my eyes. "You made a mistake, Paige," I whispered to the empty room. "You just signed your own death warrant." I saved the video file, sending it to the encrypted cloud server Dr. Evans had set up for me. Then I stood up. I went to the bathroom and washed the blood from my lip. I looked in the mirror. The eyes staring back at me were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of an executioner waiting for the drop. I would not kill her. That was too easy. I was going to destroy her. I was going to take everything she loved, everything she valued, everything she stole, and burn it in front of her face. And then, when she was nothing but ash, I would hand her over to the law. But first I had to make sure the poison was truly gone. I had to make sure Etta was strong enough to survive the war that was coming. Because tonight, the real battle began. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the streets of Atlanta into slick mirrors of neon and misery. It was the perfect cover for a man with secrets. I told Tyrell I needed to go to the 24-hour pharmacy to pick up his special protein powder, the only brand he claimed did not upset his stomach. He did not even look up from his phone. He just waved a hand, dismissing me like a servant. "Take the van," he muttered, "and do not scratch it." I did not take the van. I took my old Buick, the one I kept covered in the back of the garage under a tarp. Tyrell thought it was broken down scrap metal. He did not know I started it every Sunday while he slept to keep the engine purring. I drove 5 miles out of town to a derelict diner parking lot off the interstate. It was a place where truckers slept and deals went down in the shadows. I parked in the darkest corner under a broken street lamp. A minute later, a silver sedan pulled up beside me. It was Dr. Evans. He looked worse than he had at the hospital. His eyes were rimmed with red, and he kept checking his rearview mirror. He did not get out. He just rolled down his window an inch. I did the same. The rain blew in cold and sharp against my face. "Here," Dr. Evans whispered, passing a thick manila envelope through the gap. "Do not let anyone see this. If they find out I gave you these patient records without a court order, I lose my license. I go to jail." I took the envelope, tucking it inside my jacket. "What is it, doctor? What did you find?" Dr. Evans looked at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to cry. He took a deep, shaky breath. "It was never a stroke, Moses." The words hung in the air between the cars, heavy as lead. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We saw the scans, the paralysis, the loss of speech. Fake. All of it," Dr. Evans hissed. "I ran a full toxicology panel on the blood sample I took yesterday. I sent it to a private lab a friend of mine runs. Moses, your wife, has been systematically dosed with tubocurarin. It is a derivative of curare." Curare. The word sounded exotic and dangerous. I shook my head, not understanding. "What is that?" "It is a neuromuscular blocking agent." Dr. Evans explained, his voice trembling with rage. "It blocks the signals between the nerves and the muscles. It causes total paralysis. You cannot move. You cannot speak. You cannot even blink if the dose is high enough. But here is the thing, Moses. It does not affect the brain, and it does not affect the sensory nerves." I stared at him, the rain soaking my sleeve. I felt a cold pit opening in my stomach. "What are you saying?" "I am saying she has been awake. For 6 years, she has been fully conscious. Her mind is sharp. She can hear everything. She can see everything. And Moses, she can feel everything." I let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Oh God, she felt every bed sore. Dr. Evans continued, relentlessly forcing me to hear the horror of it. She felt the cramps in her legs from lying still for days. She felt the hunger when they forgot to feed her. She felt the thirst. She felt the humiliation of the diapers. And she felt every single time they touched her roughly. She was trapped in her own body, screaming for 6 years, and no one could hear her. I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather cracked. 6 years. I thought she was gone. I thought her mind had drifted away to a peaceful place. I had sat by her bed reading the Bible, telling her stories, thinking I was comforting a shell. But she was there. She was right there behind those frozen eyes, screaming for me to save her. And they knew. Tyrell and Paige knew. They did not just poison her to kill her. They tortured her. They kept her as a living statue, a prisoner in her own flesh. The doctor wiped rain from his face. The levels in her blood suggest they have been micro-dosing her, just enough to keep her immobile but not enough to stop her heart. Until yesterday. Yesterday the levels spiked. They are ramping it up, Moses. They are done playing. They are going to stop her diaphragm. She will suffocate, and it will look like respiratory failure. I have to go back, I said, starting the engine. I have to kill them. No. Dr. Evans reached out, grabbing my arm through the window. Do not do anything stupid. You need the police. You need this report. If you kill them, the truth dies with them. You have to catch them in the act. My phone rang. It was not the burner phone. It was my regular cell. The ringtone cut through the sound of the rain like a siren. I looked at the screen. Tyrell, I answered, putting it on speaker. Dad, where the hell are you? Tyrell's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. I am at the pharmacy, son. I lied, my voice steady despite the rage burning me alive. There was a line. Get back here, now. Tyrell screamed. Something is wrong with Mom. She is making these noises. She is gasping. Her chest is heaving. I think she's having another stroke. My heart stopped. The saline. The poison was wearing off. Her muscles were waking up. Her diaphragm was spasming as it tried to remember how to work on its own. Call 911. I shouted. Call the ambulance, Tyrell. No. No police, no ambulances, Tyrell yelled back. Paige says it is too risky. If she dies here. We are not dragging her back to the hospital so that nosy doctor can ask more questions. He was going to let her die. Or worse, he was going to finish her off because she was starting to move. Listen to me, Tyrell, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. I am 5 minutes away. Do not touch her. Do not do anything until I get there. You better hurry, old man, Tyrell hissed, because she is turning blue, and Paige is already on the phone with the cremation service. She says if Mom goes tonight, we are having her cremated immediately. No autopsy, no funeral, just ash. It is cheaper that way. The line went dead. Cremation. They were going to burn the evidence. If they cremated her, the curare would be destroyed. The puncture marks from the needles would be gone. There would be no proof. Just a pile of ash and a fat insurance check. I looked at Dr. Evans. He had heard everything. His face was white as a sheet. Go, he whispered. Go save her, Moses. I will call the detective I know, but you have to stop that cremation. I slammed the car into gear. The tires screeched on the wet asphalt. I did not care about speed limits. I did not care about safety. My wife was alive. She had been alive and suffering for 6 years while I played the fool. But the fool was dead. The man driving that Buick was a force of nature. I tore down the highway, the rain lashing against the windshield like tears. I thought of Etta trapped in the dark, screaming without a voice. I thought of Paige slapping her face. I thought of Tyrell talking about cremation like he was taking out the trash. Hang on, Etta, I whispered to the empty car, pressing the accelerator to the floor. I am coming, and I am bringing the storm with me. I pulled the Buick onto the lawn, leaving deep tire tracks in the manicured grass that Paige prized so highly. I did not care about the landscaping. I did not care about the neighbors. I ran to the front porch, my knees protesting with every step, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I reached for the smart lock keypad. My fingers punched in the code I had used for 10 years. 1952. The year Etta and I met. Red light. A harsh electronic buzz rejected me. I tried again. Maybe my hands were shaking too much. 1, 9, 5, 2. Red light. Access denied. Panic rose in my throat like bile. They had changed the code. They had locked me out of the house I built with my own money, the house I had welcomed them into when they had nowhere else to go. I pounded on the heavy oak door with my fist. "Open the door, Tyrell," I shouted. "Let me in." The Ring doorbell camera glowed with a soft blue light. Then Paige's voice crackled through the tiny speaker. It was distorted digital, but the mockery was crystal clear. "Did you get lost, Daddy Moses? You look so confused out there. Do not worry. We are letting you back in. But this is the last time. You are not going out anymore. It is not safe for a man in your condition to be wandering the streets at night." The lock mechanism whirred and clicked. The door swung open a few inches. I pushed inside, ready to fight, ready to run to Ed's room and perform CPR if I had to. But the hallway was quiet. There was no chaotic scene, no paramedics. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock. Tyrell was standing at the end of the hall, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He was not panicked. He was not crying. He looked bored. "Where is she?" I demanded, stepping toward him. "You said she was dying. You said she was turning blue." Tyrell pushed off the wall. He was big, taller than me now. He had the muscle of a man who spent his time at the gym while his father worked. He stepped into my personal space, looming over me. "She is fine, old man," he said, his voice flat. "She stabilized. It was just a little hiccup. But you are the problem." He reached out fast as a snake and snatched the phone from my hand. I tried to grab it back, but he shoved me hard against the entryway table. A vase wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Hey, be careful," Paige yelled, walking out of the kitchen. "That vase cost $300. She looked at me with disgust. "Look at him, Tyrell. He is a mess. He is violent, throwing things, driving around in the rain. He is clearly having an episode. It was a setup, a trap to get me back inside and stripped of my communications. Etta was the bait." "Give me my phone, Tyrell," I said, keeping my voice low, trying to regain some dignity. "I need to call the doctor." "You do not need to call anyone," Tyrell said, slipping my phone into his pocket. "You need to sit down and shut up. We are confiscating this for your own good. You have been making nuisance calls, bothering people, telling crazy stories. We cannot have you embarrassing the family." He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He dragged me into the living room. "Sit," he ordered, pointing at the recliner. I sat. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to assess the situation. I was trapped. The doors were digital locks controlled by their phones. The windows were storm-proof double panes. I was 71 years old, and I was a prisoner in my own living room. "Is she alive?" I asked, looking toward the hallway that led to Eda's room. "I told you she is fine," Tyrell said, pacing in front of the television. "Better than fine, actually. She is sleeping like a baby." He was lying about her being fine, but he was telling the truth about her being alive. I could feel it. If she were dead, the atmosphere would be different. They would be frantic, trying to stage the scene. This was the calm before the storm. They were waiting for something. Paige walked in holding a tablet. She tapped on the screen, checking the security feed. "Every door is secured. Motion sensors are active. If he tries to leave, the alarm will scream loud enough to wake the dead." She looked at me and smiled a thin, cruel smile. "It is for your safety, Moses. We cannot have you wandering off and getting hurt. Not before the big day." The big day. The words hung in the air. She did not mean a birthday or a holiday. She meant the day they cashed out. I watched them. Tyrell was agitated, pacing back and forth, checking his watch. Paige was cool, scrolling through her tablet, probably looking at expensive handbags she planned to buy with my life savings. They were not looking at me as a father or a father-in-law. They were looking at me as a loose end that needed to be tied up. "You guys seem tense," I said, leaning back in the chair, affecting the tremulous voice of the confused old man I had played earlier. "Is it about money? I can help. I have some savings in the coffee tin." Tyrell stopped pacing. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "The coffee tin. Yeah, Dad. Your $200 is really going to save us. You have no idea, do you? You have no idea what real money looks like." He walked over to the minibar in the corner and poured himself a drink. His hands were shaking. He was scared. The loan sharks, the debt, the timeline was compressing. They needed Etta dead tonight, and they needed me incapacitated so I could not interfere. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, starting to rise. "Sit down," Tyrell snapped. "You can hold it, or use a bottle. I do not care. You are not leaving this room." He was escalating. The mask of the caring son was slipping. He was just a thug now, a desperate thug backed into a corner. Paige looked up from her tablet. Tyrell, baby, calm down. He needs to relax. Look at him. He is shaking. She stood up and walked to the kitchen. I heard the microwave beep, the whir of the fan, the clink of a spoon against a mug. My heart rate spiked. This was it. The sedation. Paige came back into the room carrying a steaming mug. It smelled of warm milk and honey. A comfort drink, something a mother would give a child, or a killer would give a victim. "Here, Moses," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Drink this. It is warm milk with a little nutmeg. It will help you sleep. You look so tired. You have had a big day running around in the rain." She held the mug out to me. Tyrell stepped closer, his hand resting near the heavy glass decanter on the bar. The threat was implicit. Drink it, or we force it down your throat. I reached out with a trembling hand. "Thank you, Paige. You are a good girl, always looking after me." I brought the mug to my lips. The steam hit my face. Beneath the scent of milk and nutmeg there was a chemical acridity. Bitter, metallic. They had crushed pills into it, maybe sleeping pills, maybe antipsychotics, maybe the same poison they gave Etta. I took a sip. I did not swallow. I held the hot liquid in my mouth, letting it burn my tongue. I made a show of swallowing, gulping air to make my throat bob. "Good," Tyrell said, watching me closely. "Drink it all." I took another sip, holding that one too. My cheeks bulged slightly. I needed to get rid of it. I feel a bit sick. I mumbled through the liquid, keeping my lips tight. The heat. I leaned forward, coughing. I grabbed the large potted fern that stood next to the recliner. It was a big leafy plant Etta had loved. I buried my face in the leaves, pretending to heave. "Gross old man, do not puke on the rug." Paige shrieked, jumping back. In the chaos of her disgust, I spat the mouthful of poisoned milk into the dark soil of the planter. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve, making a retching sound. "I am sorry," I gasped, sitting back up. "I think it went down the wrong way." "Finish it," Tyrell commanded, stepping forward. "I do not care if you are sick. Finish the milk. It will settle your stomach." He watched me like a hawk. I raised the mug again. I had to be smarter. I took a small sip, actually swallowing a tiny amount to sell the act. It tasted vile. I grimaced. Then I tipped the mug up high, obscuring my face with the bottom of the cup. I let the liquid run down my chin, soaking into my shirt collar, pretending I was drinking greedily while actually letting most of it spill onto my clothes. "Ah, that is better," I said, lowering the empty mug. My shirt was wet and warm. I wiped my chin. Tyrell grabbed the mug from my hand. "Good. Now go to sleep. We have a lot to do tonight." He turned off the overhead light, leaving me in the dim glow of the street lamps outside. Paige and Tyrell walked toward the kitchen, whispering. "He is out," Tyrell whispered. "Give it 20 minutes. He will be out cold. Then we finish it." Paige hissed back. "Tonight, Tyrell. No more delays. The payment is due tomorrow." They left me in the semi-darkness. They thought I was drifting off into a chemically induced coma. They thought they had neutralized the only witness. But the milk was in the plant. The poison was on my shirt, not in my blood. I sat in the chair, letting my breathing slow and deepen, mimicking sleep. My eyes were closed to slits, watching, waiting. They were preparing for the finale. They were going to kill Etta tonight. But they forgot one thing. They locked me in the living room. But the living room connected to the hallway. And the hallway connected to the closet where I kept my old baseball bat. The one I used to chase away stray dogs. I was not asleep. I was a coil waiting to spring. And tonight, when they walked into that bedroom to end my wife's life, they were going to find out that the old man was not helpless. He was hunting. I sat in the chair, my body heavy, my mind racing. The milk I had spit into the plant was supposed to be my sedative, my ticket to oblivion. Tyrell and Paige were watching me from the kitchen island, their silhouettes sharp against the dim light. They were waiting for me to slump over. They were waiting for the silence. But I was not going to give them silence. I was going to give them chaos. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted to see. A broken, senile old man losing his mind. I let my head loll back, my mouth falling open. I started to hum a low, discordant sound that vibrated in my chest. Then I let the hum turn into a mumble. "The boxes," I slurred, my voice thick. The boxes are wrong. Inventory count is off. Tell the boys to restack the pallets. Tyrell stepped closer, his glass of scotch in hand. What is he talking about? He is hallucinating, Paige said, her voice filled with disdain. The drugs are kicking in. Finally. I stood up. I did it clumsily, knocking the side table with my hip. The lamp wobbled and crashed to the floor, the bulb shattering with a pop. "Hey!" Tyrell shouted. "Watch it, old man!" I did not look at him. I looked at the wall, my eyes wide and unfocused. "Fire in the hole!" I screamed, pointing at the painting of the fruit bowl. "Get the water!" The warehouse is burning. Save the inventory. I grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and threw it at the imaginary fire. I stumbled forward, knocking over a stack of magazines. I was a whirlwind of clumsy, destructive energy. I channeled every ounce of fear, every drop of rage, and twisted it into madness. Then came the hardest part, the part that required me to sacrifice the last shred of my dignity to save my wife. I stood in the middle of the expensive Persian rug Paige loved so much. I relaxed my bladder. I let the warm urine flow down my legs, soaking my trousers, pooling on the wool. The shame was hot and sharp, but I held on to it. I used it. I looked down at the wet spot spreading around my shoes. I looked up at Tyrell, my face crumbling into the expression of a confused, terrified child. "I had an accident," I whimpered. "I made a mess." Paige let out a shriek of pure disgust. "Oh my God, he is pissing on the rug. Tyrell, do something, he is ruining everything." Tyrell just laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "Look at him, Paige. He is gone. His brain is mush. The cocktail worked better than we thought. He is not even here anymore." He walked over to me, stepping carefully around the puddle. He waved his hand in front of my face. I did not blink. I stared through him, muttering about shipping manifests and lost cargo. "You are a vegetable, Dad," Tyrell sneered. "A wet, smelly vegetable." He shoved me back into the recliner. "Sit there and rot. We have real business to discuss." They turned their backs on me. That was the victory. They turned their backs. To them, I was no longer a person. I was an object, a nuisance, a piece of furniture that smelled like urine. They did not lower their voices because you do not whisper in front of a broken toaster. Paige grabbed a bottle of wine and poured herself a large glass, her hands shaking. "I cannot believe we have to deal with this," she hissed, taking a long gulp. "But at least he is out of the way. Now about tomorrow." "We are good for tomorrow," Tyrell said, leaning against the counter. "Once Mom is gone tonight, I call the insurance agent in the morning. I already have the claim forms filled out. We tell them she passed peacefully in her sleep. Respiratory failure, expected complications." "It has to be fast, Tyrell," Paige said, her voice tight with a fear I had not heard before. "I got a text from Marcus. He is not waiting anymore." Marcus. That was a name I did not know. "Tell him to back off," Tyrell said, trying to sound tough but failing. "Tell him the money is coming." "I cannot tell him anything." Paige slammed her glass down. "He knows, Tyrell. He knows I lied about the investment fund. He knows there is no crypto portfolio." I stopped my mumbling for a split second, my heart seizing. Investment fund. Crypto. "He lent me $500,000 because I promised him a 20% return in 3 months. Paige continued, her voice rising in hysteria. "I told him I had insider tips. I told him I was a genius, and I lost it all. Every single cent. I put it all on Black Tyrell. I put it on risky futures that tanked overnight." I listened, my mind reeling. It was not just Tyrell's gambling, it was Paige. She was the one who had dug the hole. $500,000, $500,000. "He is not a bank, Tyrell," Paige sobbed. "He is the cartel. He launders money through real estate. That is how I met him. He told me if he does not have his principal plus the interest by noon tomorrow, he is going to send a crew." "A crew?" Tyrell's face went ashen. "To the house," Paige whispered. "He said he will cut off my fingers first, one by one, until the debt is paid, and then he will start on you." The reality of their desperation crashed down on me. They were not just greedy, they were dead people walking. They had stolen my money, maxed out my credit, and it still wasn't enough. They had burned through everything. The $2 million from Etta's life insurance was not a windfall for a luxury life. It was a ransom payment for their own lives.